Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. And if you're watching this on the day of release, happy Warhammer Day. Yes, it is Warhammer Day. It is also preview time and there's quite a lot of stuff to cover. So without further ado, let's crack on. I suppose before we get into the various models and rules that have been commented on across the various systems that Games Workshop provide, the big news. We've got a rough idea now of when Warhammer The Old World is going to be released. You might have noticed it's now got its own tab on Warhammer Community, which is great, but they have given us a concept of when the game's coming out, and that is early 2024. Games Workshop have said it's going to be one of the first releases in the new year. So for those of us who are hoping November, December, get your stuff in time for Christmas, a little bit disappointing, but we now know at least that the game is just around the corner, which is fantastic. Okay, so with that, let's move on and look at the models that have been released. I had expected maybe a little bit of Tomb King action, but all of the Warhammer Old World stuff portrayed is Bretonnian, and they've given us an idea really of what the full range of models that's going to be available initially for Bretonnia looks like. So let's have a look. The first model to talk about is the hero on a Pegasus. This is a new plastic kit and it looks like it can be built in a number of different ways. The concept being, from the discussion on the preview, that the bigger the helmet, the more elaborate the helmet, the higher the prestige, the more important the character is. So the Duke has a gigantic helmet with all sorts of stuff sticking off it. The Baron has a simpler headgear and so forth. Now, I think this looks like a really nice centerpiece model. It's got some customizability, which is nice. Actually, I think, to be honest, the way they built the Baron model looks nicer than the Duke model. But, just me. Interestingly, we can also have a BSB on a Pegasus as part of this kit as well. So giving your battle standard bearer a lot of maneuverability, ability to get around the board. Does mean, though, that he can't sit in a big block of cavalry or a big block of infantry, presumably, in order to get the sort of protection you'd expect there. So I would guess he'd need to fly around with Pegasus Knights in order to keep him safe from cannonballs and the like. Overall, though, yeah, it's a really cool model. I do like it. There's a suggestion we'll probably see a few of these sort of turning up at Golden Demon type events, and I can absolutely understand why. Moving on, we have the Foot Knights of the Realm. This is a unit we've known for quite some time was coming. And, well, they actually strike me as having a lot in common with the Age of Sigmar, Cities of Sigmar range. The sort of style of the shields, the style of the helmets, just seem to be a lot of, well, let's say compatibility across those two ranges. I'm not sure if I like it or not for most of them, but the command group, particularly the unit champion, looks absolutely amazing. So this unit can be equipped either with swords and shields or with great weapons, and the great weapons, they're very fantasy. They are huge. They're far bigger than I think they reasonably ought to be. These aren't weapons being wielded by orcs. You don't need axe heads that big. You just don't. So I'm not sure I like the aesthetic of the great weapons. The sword and board, however, they do look quite nice as a combination. Aside from comments I've made before about the helmets, yeah, I think they're looking fairly pretty. The one character I think that really does get away with the ridiculously oversized helm is the unit champion. Such a good centerpiece model for the unit. Does look cool. Does seem to overcome those sort of challenges I've mentioned. And I think potentially the Foot Knights will really lead into a new way of using Bretonnians, and I'm hoping to do a separate video on that fairly soon, talking about my predictions for the new style of play for Bretonnia. So watch this space for that. We're also seeing a new resin model, which is a handmaiden. This model has the illusion of flying by being stood on a tactical plant. It's got smooth, clean lines. There's a little bit of detail, but not tons of detail. And actually, I really like that. It's got a clean simplicity to it, but still looks like a really nice model. So I think it'll be one that will be quite a lot of fun to paint up without people getting obsessed with tons and tons of detail, as we've seen in some other model ranges. For example, the way Space Marines have gone for Warhammer 40,000. So yeah, this one is just a tick straight out of the box, I think, for me. From there, Games Workshop have also said what the rest of the initial offering will be for Bretonnians. So on top of the figures we've seen before, we're looking at Bretonnian Knights of the Realm on horseback. This is a returning plastic kit, although it was explained that the kit will be compatible with the new Foot Knight. So there'll be the opportunity to make some changes and do a bit of kit bashing conversions across the two kits, which would probably be quite nice, because I do think the older helmet style is a little bit nicer than the new ones. But again, that's just me on the aesthetic front. Also coming back are the Pegasus Knights. They were pretty ubiquitous when it came to 8th edition. If you ever saw a Bretonnian army, it always had a unit of these guys, so not surprised to see these coming back. Seeing a couple of peasant units in the form of men-at-arms and bowmen. There was a comment on the preview around the drummers of peasant units having frogs on the end of drumsticks. A bit of a play on perhaps the classic Francophobic views that you've got in the past from Britain, and just poking the bit of fun at the French a little bit there with that one. Finally comes the Trebuchet. This is a rework of the old metal kit, but will be coming in Forge World resin rather than metal. So it's probably going to be a little bit easier to work with than just metal. Perhaps would have been a bit nicer if it was in plastic, but beggars can't be choosers, just I think. I understand from what viewers have told me that Forge World resin is an awful lot better than the Failcast stuff previously. I've not got experience of Forge World resin, so we'll just have to see what it's like if I actually get around to buying any of these figures. Although it wasn't mentioned as part of the preview, I think I also need to touch on the model that was previewed ahead of the preview, which is the Battle Standard Bearer on foot. This is also a really lovely looking model, and I think if it wasn't painted so cleanly, a bit more bashed up, for example, a bit more stained in the paint scheme, this could easily tell a story of that lone warrior surrounded by enemies, fighting to the last, desperately protecting the banner of his lord. There's something about the model that just shouts that there's a story here to be told. And I'm really interested to see what other people who are probably definitely far more talented painters than I am can do with that particular model. Having had a little bit more time to peruse this figure, though, with the pictures on the old interweb before the preview, there's probably a couple of minor quibbles that I've got. One is I don't understand the leather skirt he's wearing under his surcoat. He's already got chain shortsies on, and if he wanted, as a model, as a person, to improve the leg protection he's got, then you'd expect a plate of some kind, hardened leather maybe, probably a metal plate, given he does have other plates, so the technology's there to do them. A soft leather skirt offers little protection, particularly as it's not even a solid piece of leather, it's lots of strips coming down, so it'll just move out of the way. I don't see the point. The other minor quibble that I have is with the crossguard on the sword. So given the fleur-de-lis shape, I think it would be better, albeit it would make the model perhaps a little bit more fragile, if there was a small gap between the curves up from the fleur-de-lis and the blade itself. The reason for this being that if you've got a gap there, you can actually use the crossguard to catch the enemy weapon against your blade and take control of it, and then use your own weapon to control the enemy's blade and be able to engage them in a safe manner and deliver the hit that you want to get in. And that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is the show we have for Warhammer the Old World. Fairly comprehensive amount of models coming out the start of next year for Warhammer Old World. It is only Bretonnians that are showcased, so we know that there's been some Tomb Kings stuff, but we know very little about it. And we've seen, a drawing of an orc, so it'll be interesting to see what sort of timeline we're looking at for other factions being released. But all in all, as I say, it looks pretty positive if you are fancying taking out the Bretonnians. It's important to note, I think, as well, though, that it's not just Warhammer the Old World that got a mention as part of this preview. There's comments also for Age of Sigmar, there's Kill Team, there's 40k. Let's talk about the Age of Sigmar stuff. We've got a couple of models here being released, some stuff about a new book as well. I'm not going to dwell on the book, but I do want to look at certainly one of these two models in a bit more detail. The Stormcast have a new character, a redone of a character, Ionis Cryptborn. This, to me, looks very much like some kind of Space Marine chaplain on a dragon. The dragon, though, looks amazing, and we're told as part of the kit there'll be quite a bit of customization around the dragon. Now, the character, as I say, looks like a Space Marine chaplain, and perhaps if you aren't intending to play Age of Sigmar, you could just use it as that. But the model does scream to me a little bit around conversion potential, and I could really see this model being a really cool mount for a Chaos Lord or a Vampire or something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised to see people who do the old conversion stuff online knocking out some work on those not too far distant future, certainly once those models get released. The dragon looks like it would fit in really nicely, in my eyes, to Warhammer Fantasy, so there's plenty of scope for getting some use out of this model. The other Age of Sigmar figure is Belthanos, who is the Age of Sigmar equivalent of a Wood Elf avatar riding a giant insect. On the aesthetics, this model does absolutely nothing for me. Some people might like it, fine. I just can't bring myself to enjoy it. My first reaction to it was pretty much, what on earth is this? And I do think it almost looks like two figures jammed together rather than a single piece. Maybe it's in part it's the paint job or the way it's been assembled. I don't know. I can't really see it being usable in fantasy, as maybe it would work in an Orc and Goblin force, actually, if you don't want giant spiders, for example, and you want another creature, you could use this bug. Maybe that's the way forward. Not really sure. But that's Age of Sigmar, that and a new book coming out. Turning briefly to the other news, so we've got Necrons coming as the next codex for Warhammer 40,000. There's a new plastic model of Imhotep Stormlord coming. Looks pretty decent. I do wonder about fragility. The Necrons I've got rid of them now, but had from the Indomitus box set of 9th edition, 40k, they were pretty fragile. The joints they did like to snap a little bit, so I do wonder whether this figure will suffer from the same sort of issues, but looks decent. Comes with War Scythe and a gauntlet which has a built-in heavy flamer. There was also a little bit of explanation that the new codex, when it comes out, as I say, next one down the track, there's going to be, again, as we've come to expect now, I think, for Warhammer 40,000, a bunch of different ways in which we can use this particular army. One of the options looks like it's going to be a lot around teleporting, lots of movement, so maybe monoliths being a bit more important. And the other version they talked around was a build centered around flayed ones, destroyers, things like that. That army seems to come with an enhancement which can give you a fight on death on a 4+, which, you know, potentially quite interesting. Brings that army perhaps into the sort of sphere of the World Eaters, for example. Finally, in the range of model releases, there is an Admech Sidonian Skatros model. This is a new sniper figure which is available for, well, Admech. Comes with either an anti-character weapon, a Radium Drazael, or an anti-vehicle/monster weapon in the form of an arquebus. A couple of comments in the chat referring to this as tall boy. Comes on very tall, thin-looking legs. Again, this screams to me the model's going to break if you take it and play anywhere other than your own home. Hopefully that's not the case. So it does look a bit fragile, and again, my first impressions of seeing this model were not particularly promising from an aesthetic value. Didn't particularly enjoy it. I don't think it looks great. It's not something I'll be rushing out to get, but I'm also not an Admech player. I've not really dived into the imagery or anything to do with that force, so it may well be that this strikes more to your taste than it does to mine. Warhammer is such a broad church that, yeah, it could very easily be a thing. We've all got different tastes after all. Finally, a quick nod on Kill Team. So we're seeing a new season starting for Salvation. The new teams available for this will be Striking Scorpions and Space Marine Scout. So some good news here to Eldar players. Perhaps slightly tongue-in-cheek, I could say, as if you need some more good fortune at the moment. The new kit's going to be plastic, so replacing the really old figures that are available. Currently, there's not going to be a lot of weapon options for them. Some slight customization, I think. There's also going to be a choice of helmets and bare heads. Buying the Kill Team is going to be the only way that these models are available initially, although they will be later released as stand-alone figures. The other one being Space Marine Scout. So again, this will be the first way to get the new Scouts. They'll get released later on, so will be usable for Kill Team and 40k. This model, or this unit, is said to come with quite a good range of weapon options, basically to make sure you can equip it, presumably with the options available in the codex. So there we have it, all the news of note from the preview. I think the exciting stuff, this being an old world centered channel, is very much the release date announcement and seeing what we're going to get from the Bretonnians. I look forward to seeing a bit more about what we can get to oppose those Bretonnians, what other factions are going to be available and when. But for now, we're seeing some nice models coming down the track, and we've got a sense of when this is coming, which hopes can put a load of the rumour mongering and the debate to bed, and we can all just get on with looking forward to the release of the new game. The final thing from me is just to say, if you have enjoyed this video, do consider having a look at some of the other ones I've done previously, some of my predictions. Some have been close to the mark-ish, some horrendously wrong. Do have a look, and if you've enjoyed them, do also consider subscribing. It is the best way of supporting the channel. Overall, though, thank you very much for listening. I am returned to the old world. Have a great day.